Yeah, 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 yeah. Yep, 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 yep. We on. We are on like Donkey Kong. Let's see here. Let's see if my microphone is working. Is my mic working? Is my mic work? Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Everything is working. I think we're good. We should
I don't
be.
even see you because I'm just like looking in my computer, just not paying any attention because it's easier for me, to do that. I don't like seeing myself on the screen. It's crazy.
That's all right.
Ain't that crazy? I don't like seeing myself
That's all
on
right.
anything, but
That's all right. It's all good in the hood. It's all good.
I'm glad you gathered the family together. That's
Yes.
always good.
Well, the whole purpose for this obviously is um for the conversations that we've had for years about money, and specifically a conversation we were having the other day about just some concepts and stuff. And I started going, man, I wonder how many of our other family members, cousins and other relatives um are, especially now. I mean, now is just such a tragic time to even talk about money because who prepares for a pandemic well, you know what I mean? I mean,
Right.
you just don't do that. And so
But you know what? I would push back on that a little bit
okay,
because
okay,
I would say, if we look specifically in the African American community kind of across the United States, where
yeah,
we've been at double digit unemployment for some time. And so where other communities have been in a recession at certain points, I would say that Black community, specifically our family, right? Because we have the spectrum in our family, right? We have
right,
every single tax bracket. We've been in a depression for some times, right?
mm,
Because that's
mm.
just, I think it's just, so when you think about it that way, when you say who prepares for a pandemic, you know, I feel like we have to start preparing for tragedies, which is terrible, right? Because in the positive mindset, we want to be positive and we want to constantly see, the end result of something amazing. But at the same time, we have to prepare for times like these because we are guaranteed to have them, you know? So that's
Well,
kind of crazy, but it's so true.
but so I guess the question then becomes, how then do we prepare? Because, like, I mean, how do we prepare? What does that look like? We have conversations a lot. And one of the things that we talked about, and I won't get into necessarily the specifics per se
Yeah.
right now, but you know, when I think of preparation, I think of going to talk to somebody about money, or to find, who do I know that knows something about money? And one of the things I don't think our family members know is that, like, we have somebody in our family that kind of knows money. You know what I mean? That went to school for it. You know what I'm saying? Like, actually understands the system. We've had some different conversations, but one of the things that was really neat was just almost a year ago, we came to you with a particular scenario, and you gave us some really good advice about not making a decision. We almost made a $268,000 mistake. You know what I'm saying? That would have been catastrophic had I not been able to ask you something like that. And so I guess what I'm wanting to kind of what I want to kind of dig into a little bit is, maybe what are some of the pitfalls that a lot of us go through pertaining to our money? What are some common mistakes? Let's start off with just some of that, just
All
some of the
right.
common mistakes that we make.
Well, first, I'm sorry that I'm not looking at you and I'm on the computer doing other things. Ain't that terrible? Like my blue screen glasses, I was having some problems in front of the blue screen. But anyways, thanks for saying that and for always like rocking with me. I appreciate you and I love you guys. And I think what is really cool about our relationship and how our families blend is that we don't have a problem being vulnerable and talking about what is real. You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying?
yeah.
And so I think we're able to help each other avoid some costly mistakes because we're able to keep it all the way 100 with each other. So had you been in the situation where you were like, oh, I don't want you in my financial business, we wouldn't have had that conversation and the
Right.
result would have been totally different.
Right.
And you extend that to me in my marriage, right?
Right. Right.
There's things in my marriage that I talk to you about. And I think that vulnerability is important. And I think the ability to be able to pull up and talk about things as a family without worrying about judgment are super important, and so we do it casually and formally, like we schedule time legitimately with one another.
Right.
And I feel like other families have to do that, specifically Black families, because we're in a culture where we say stay out of grown folks' business, right?
Mm.
I mean,
Mm.
we don't really talk about money. We don't have financial conversations as a family. It's very rare for Black families because of the nature of the culture, right? Americans, um, depending on where you come from, to even understand and know like the net worth of their parents, where the life insurance policy is, kind of all that stuff. And
Yeah.
so part of it is just feeling like, if you can't get with everybody in your family, if you can't rock with everyone, then find someone that you can, or extend your family through your network, right? Because we have everything going on in our family. I mean, right here, I literally have a bottle of wine. I know you're, anti-alcohol. Seriously,
No, I'm
this
not. No,
this is
I'm not.
Theophilus, from the Theophilus Vineyards. It's a Black woman-owned winery, and I literally have my glass and my chocolate-covered strawberries. I mean, we're just chilling and we're having a
That's
conversation.
because
But
that's because you're one of those bourgeois Negroes.
no, I'm not. Stop it.
Yes, you are.
Anyways,
You're
don't even go
bougie.
there.
You're
Anyways,
bougie.
not even close.
Yes, you are.
Stop it. So when we're talking about us, when we're talking about our family, when we're talking about the Black community, when we're talking about spending money, savings, preparing for a pandemic, preparing for financial tragedies, I think we all have to start, regardless what kind of family we have, how blended the family is, and whatever's going on. I always feel like we have to start with spending. And I think it's even more important in communities of color. It's even more important in the African American community. Um, and so when we have our financial meeting, we have our family discussion, when me and my husband get together, and you and your wife do this, and you guys do this as a family, and you do this as a household, um, I feel like we always have to start with spending. Did you see that video I sent you earlier
I
today?
did. I wanna
We should
play it.
watch.
I wanna
Yes,
I wanna
you're not even on my screen, so I got to figure out where you're at. But let's watch that because that's real deep. And I just kind of want to get like your opinion. I got to find where you are. I don't even know where you are, but let's listen to that video because I feel like that's the basis for a lot of our issues in the African American
well,
community.
and before we start that, it's interesting that I'll bring this point up afterwards, but let me play this and let's see what we get. How do I
Why
play
am I
this?
so shiny? This is why I don't like looking at myself on video.
Why is this not playing? All right, let me see. Hold on one second. Let me see something here.
But we all know that before you can sell to customers, you've got to get to know them. You must understand.
Can you hear that?
Yeah, but can you turn it up?
Customers buy. Why do they buy? How do you sell to them?
You probably have to turn it up.
Let's find out. Let's hear the opinion of men who spend a long time studying the buying habits of customers the world over. Here is what sales psychologists have.
I can't hear it, Jason.
One word. That word is recognition. Now, there's nothing unusual about that. People want to be recognized. They need recognition. That's basic in all of us. But perhaps because he's had so little of it, the Negro needs even more. He needs to feel important and appreciated. This need is a very real and important one. It shows up even in many of the Negro's shopping habits. Anyone who sells or wants to sell to the Negro customer should know about some of these habits. Three habits in particular play a big part in every sales transaction. To begin with, most Negroes buy by brand. They ask for products by name. They're quick to turn down off brands. Do you wonder why? Well, listen to what this customer is thinking.
That last hat I bought just didn't hold up at all.
Buying by brand. That's the first important Negro buying habit. Now for the second. The Negro buys good quality merchandise. Symbols of quality and prestige are very important to the Negro customer. This woman, for example, is buying fine crystalware. But she is also buying the admiration and approval of her friends and relatives. Listen to her thoughts.
My, isn't it beautiful? I can hardly wait to show it to Sally and Joan.
It's a well-known fact that many Negro customers are influenced by the opinions of others. What their friends may think of a certain item often decides whether or not the sale is made. So remember, the Negro buys quality merchandise. That's the second important point. And here's the third thing to remember when selling to a Negro customer. When he specifically asks for one thing, don't try to sell him something else. Don't try to switch him at the point of sale. If you do, he'll probably react something like this.
Doesn't he think I've got the money to pay for it?
There's a reason for this reaction. Again, because he's had experience with cheap merchandise, the Negro resents being offered a substitute. He wants to be sold on quality, not price. The Negro buys by brand, he buys quality, and he doesn't like to be switched at point of sale. These are the keys to selling the Negro customer.
Wow. Man, that is that's heavy. When you start talking about spending, when we talk about the spending habits in the Black community, when you talk about being able to free up extra money, the thing I was going to share was, when Marla became a stay-home mom years ago, one of the things that we had to do immediately, because we lost a huge income. She was actually making more than me at the time, and like significant amount of money. And one of the first things we did was, we had to start cutting off cable and, taking all these, we turned cable off, got the phone turned off. We tried to do everything cheaper so that we could conserve as much money as we possibly could. You know what I mean? And I just wonder, what kind of sacrifices are we willing to make to be able to get ourselves in a position to be able to be comfortable? And then what does comfort look like too, right? It's a well-known fact. I mean, just to try to spend more than what I have to look like I have more to a whole bunch of people that don't have anything and are doing the same thing. It's kind of ridiculous. So I've learned, I have money now to buy whatever pants and shirts, shoes, whatever I want, but I wear the same jeans every day. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't even care. One thing I learned a long time ago is white folks don't do a lot of that stuff. Rich people don't go out and buy $40,000 pants and, $150 pants and or they might buy one pair that they wear all the time. Rich people do things a little bit different. So I tried to start adopting some of those habits myself. What are some things that you're seeing? What are some suggestions that you would have for folks in our family to free up some of the money that they feel like they don't have right now that they could if they change some of their habits?
Well, first I want to say that we have to recognize and understand that different people have different levels of struggle, and everybody's struggle is real in that particular moment. So we have to have, respect for what different people are going through at different stages and different times. So that's number one. But when we talk about rejecting hyperconsumerism in the Black community, it is a part of collective identity, right? If we really want to get into it. So there's a study, and this is super old. It was by Michelle Lamont, and it's in the Journal of Consumer Culture. So it's a legitimate research piece, and it's about how Blacks use consumption to shape their collective identity. So when you decide as a African American person that you are going to reject hyperconsumerism and spend less money, you are actually stepping aside from collective identity. And so I want to get into some tips, into some things that I think that we should all know and understand, but I also think that we have to understand kind of how this came to be. So it's not just everyone being irresponsible. You know, it's unfair for us to use that type of language, right?
Okay. Okay.
Because of the fact that it's embedded in we have hyper consumerism and product placement in rap music embedded in the culture. I think, you know, they did a research piece on Jay-Z's product placement in his music, and it was a lot more prevalent when he was a younger rapper than it is today, right? But when you look at Cardi B and red bottom shoes, right? I mean, she didn't have shares of the stock. She didn't have equity in the company when she was out here essentially raising money for red bottoms,
Mm.
right? And so now we have a goal for young women to go out and get red bottoms. They don't even have a place to stay. Like this kind of mind frame and framework doesn't make a lot of sense. But there's also a there's also identity kind of attached to it. And that's historically, according to this research piece, right? You don't even have to listen to what I say. This is a legitimate research piece from Princeton University, and it's old. It's from 2001, but what they're saying still makes a lot of sense. It says that African Americans actively shape the meaning of the category of the Black consumer for the public at large. It said that they believe that African Americans use consumption to defy racism and share collective identities most valued in American society. It's like a middle class membership. And that's why don't ever call me bougie again, because I'm not bougie. But anyway, you
Don't
can
tell me
read
what to say. I'll say what I
you
want
can
to say.
read the research piece, and it talks about, it gives like a detailed exploratory analysis, and it says how a low status group, Black Americans, use consumption to express and transform their collective identity and acquire social membership. And, you know, it's really crazy because when we're looking at our athletes and entertainers, you know, you can look at them and tell who they are by the bling from afar, right? And it is only, and I'm not bashing us, I'm not doing that, but I'm saying it's only us that are adorned in gold and diamonds, right? And we've been doing that since the beginning of time. That's why we know the root of Egypt, right? You know, all of the gold and all of these things, you know. So we've been doing this since the beginning of time, but we have to understand that, you know, that type of action, you know, there's a cause and effect associated with it. And what we do is we are promoting hyperconsumerism versus investment and wealth transfer and legacy. And I feel like in our family, in this discussion, you know, at the end of the day, for you and Marla, for me, it always comes down to what we will pass to our children. You know what I mean? What we'll leave behind? What is the legacy, you know, that we'll leave? And that's an important discussion that should be at the forefront. So I said all that to say it's not a bashing session. If you don't have enough money, I get it. You know, I get it. You get it, right? So
Right.
it's just about where can we meet where we are and still move the comma to the left? Where can we meet where we are and still build wealth and still leave a legacy, regardless how much money we have at the end of the month? And at the end of the day, you can only make more money or spend less. So you have to learn, unless you win the lottery, you do a GoFundMe campaign or some sort of crowdfunding, and a lot of people, you know, give to whatever your cause is, or, you know, you start a business, you make a lot of money, you have some amazing financial windfall. If all of that happens, then cool. But if it doesn't, we have to focus on our mindset, and we can either make more money or spend less. And in order to keep the money that we have when we make more money, then we have to be able to exercise discipline through our spending, vote with our dollars, and reject hyperconsumerism, right? And so I think the book that we should really adapt as a family for the quarter is well, there's two books. One is Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice. The other one is Stop Acting Rich by Dr. Thomas Stanley, right? And, you know, there's so many different tools and things in that book that we can adopt. But I probably went off on a tangent. But the first thing is rejecting hyperconsumerism. The second, I think that we have to do as a family, and you and I always talk about this on a regular basis, but it's really being intentional and voting with our dollar. So one is reducing spending, and you've done that when Marla went to stay at home. You know, I did that, you know, when I was scared about, you know, an income shortfall. And you know, the crazy thing is, as I remember saying, okay, I'm just gonna make this a practice, right? Like, and now, you know, I cut off cable. I think I did it for 90 days in like 2008 at some point, or maybe 2007. And I think I did it for an article or something like that. And then I just decided, you know what? I'm not going to pay for cable again. I don't like all the commercials. I do fine with Netflix, the internet, Hulu, and all of the various subscriptions, you know. So where can we cut expenses to save money? Because that's all we can do unless we're going to make more, is basically what I'm saying. And everybody can be a part of that, regardless where we are in the tax bracket, right? Regardless where we are in the tax tables, we have to learn to become disciplined with our spending, whether times are tough and we don't have enough money to make ends meet, or we have an abundance. We still have to exercise that muscle and that discipline around spending.
Well, I think the first key to recognizing that something needs to change, the first key to change is recognizing that something needs to change. And so if we don't look at the way hyper consumerism works in our own communities and how everybody around us is doing the same thing, and to depart from what has become the norm is something that's really difficult to do. So that's the biggest and probably the most important step, is to reject the idea of hyper consumerism, to spend and spend, to either to eradicate some kind of depression, to get rid of some type of feeling of whatever, to try to feel as though I'm something that I'm not, whatever. I think that's a really important thing, because when you start talking about, I heard today, I'm a part of a group that talks about wealth a lot, and somebody was asking a question about how do I want to increase my cash flow to be able to do some other things with some of my investments. And the person said the same thing you did. They said, well, go get another hustle, right? Go get another hustle. And I started thinking to myself, but think about what that means. Like it doesn't make sense to go get another hustle to make up for the mistakes that I could be switching over here. So if I don't address what I'm doing, I'll go get another job, which in turn means I have to take more time away from my family. That's not always a reality. It's not always a reality. So to get another job, you know what I mean? And if it is, maybe it's for a season, but the idea is that I had to make some changes. We had to we don't have cable. I had to get rid of, but it took me looking like, well, like if I mean, I got 160 channels and ain't nothing even on TV. It doesn't matter anyway. I only had cable because everybody else did. So what do I need cable for? But then the question becomes, what do we then do with our money though? Because what if I am bringing some extra money home? How do I fix myself to start working on legacy?
Okay, hold on a second. I just have to pause to say, like, I feel like we gloss past that way too fast. Not, I'm not talking about
Like
us.
what?
I'm not talking about us. I'm talking about in general when we talk about spending and the connection to Black America, right? And when we talk about, it's Black History Month, we talk about economic oppression and we talk about the things that have happened basically systemically to eradicate Black wealth. And this is an uncomfortable conversation. I mean, obviously this is just us, this is just our family, but when we have this conversation publicly, you have to be careful because people will think that one, you're racist, or two, you're talking about some form of redistribution of wealth, or maybe you're talking about reparations or something like that. And the reality it is, you're really not, right? You're talking about hyper consumerism, you're talking about spending um during segregation, because we had a lot of Black millionaires during that time. We had a lot of people spending money in the community, which leads me to my second point. But then people always talk about slavery as the oppression economically, but they forget everything that happened post 1865. And I talk about it all the time, like publicly. So you have peonage, you have black codes, convict lease, Jim Crow, civil rights, redlining, urban renewal, gentrification. In addition to that, you have oh my gosh, I can't think of the name, but it's the racial covenants in a lot of the
Mhm.
deeds across the United States. Like, this is legitimate and real. And this is post 1865. So what we have to realize is there's been systemic racism, there's been systemic oppression, right?
Right.
And systemic economic exclusion. And when you understand all of those things, it puts everything in context, because it's really unfair for me to get, anywhere publicly. And I try not to do it. And obviously, this is just us. But when you get places publicly and we talk about the wealth gap, it's unfair to discuss the wealth gap without talking about all of those economic
Facts.
layers.
Facts.
Exactly. You know what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
and people in my industry come up and they say, "Oh, the average wealth of Black women is $5," but they're not talking about black codes, convict lease, post 1865 slavery by another name. Nobody's mentioning any of these things, and they
Right.
have a big impact. So when we talk about rejecting hyper consumerism, you know that I don't go to protests, right? My husband doesn't go to protests. He has a business. But where we do take action is how we deal with our money, right? That is our movement. And so we need to make it a movement, right? It's not about all of these different labels and brands that we don't have any investment in whatsoever. Wearing somebody's name who does not care about you, doesn't have your political interest in mind, and likely would not hire you if you applied for a job at their company. So it's about taking on the investment mindset to say, no, I'm going to reject that and start to build wealth. And we can do that regardless where we're at, right? Like, regardless where we are financially. And that's a place where we can all agree. So it's like, yeah, okay, now we've got this down. Now we're cutting our expenses. We're staying in the black, we're saving money, we're spending less, right? Our protest for this house is that we support and patron businesses that are in alignment with our goals and our values, right? And that's why I've got this Theophilus, right? Vineyards wine here, right? Black women owned winery, right? Because we are voting with our dollars. And sometimes in certain crowds and certain groups, people will say, gosh, if you said you're supporting white owned businesses, I would be racist. some people will say that as a pushback. And what they don't realize is it takes an actual effort for me and my husband to decide that we want to support businesses in the Black community and what that means. We have double digit unemployment. We have a recession. We have a depression, a deep depression in communities of color. We have an education gap, a wealth gap, a health gap, a debt gap, all of those gaps. And if I don't want to stand outside with a sign in a one woman protest when it's 20 below, the best thing I can do is circulate my dollar in the community. Why? Because there is absolute research that when I patron a Black owned business, that we are doing what we can to close the debt gap, that we're doing what we can to close the unemployment gap in that community, which is important to me. And it takes an active effort. And when you think about my cash flow on a monthly basis, think about our biggest expenses. A white person, and it's no shade. I mean, we have all kinds of people in our family, every race, everything. But they don't have.
You can talk about white folks. I'm half
No,
white.
no. I know. But what I'm saying is,
I'll give you
no,
permission.
but anyways, what I'm saying is, you don't have to make an active effort, right? You don't have to. When we had our wedding, we had a 90% African American spend at our wedding because it was so expensive. We wanted to make sure that we were creating jobs in our community and supporting hiring people in our community, right?
And y'all had like 600 people or something.
We had 600. We had 600 people in our wedding.
I performed the wedding just
did.
Let people know.
Anyways, everybody knows you. Everybody was at the wedding. Everybody who's listening was at the wedding. But here's the thing, though. What was crazy about that is our liquor distributor. Our liquor distributor was not Black owned, but she was woman owned, and she was from the LGBT community. Every single detail. The person who did our decor, she was Black owned. The person who did our wedding cake, all of that. And it was all family. And what I'm saying is it takes a effort, because when we went to other wedding venues, they told us we couldn't go with a certain caterer. They told us we couldn't go with a certain designer. And all of those decisions are systemic decisions that exclude a group of people.
That's
so it's crazy. And what I want to be able to do is vote with my dollar and participate in a money movement in a community that's in a depression. And I should have the right to do so, because we're only talking about a small fraction of the overall budget, because we very well know that my mortgage is with a major bank, right? And if we just start to look at that, most banks insured slavery, right? And participate as sometimes the largest investors of slavery by another name, which are privatized prisons. So when we vote by our dollar, it's a movement, and it isn't an exclusionary movement to other people. What it is most inclusive, right? Because we don't believe in handouts, and no business owner ever wants a handout. Right? The average African American woman-owned business is making $27,000 in revenue on an annual basis. What can I do to move the needle incrementally? How can I move the dial? How can we do this as a family? Well, I would hope that you would go to Elsa's House of Sleep if you're in Minnesota to buy your furniture. You know what I'm saying? I hope that we go to Sammy's Avenue Eatery. When I buy my vehicle that I want to buy, I'm going to purchase that vehicle from a Black woman-owned car dealership in Huntsville, Alabama, and get that car shipped here. Because I want to change the depression in the community, and it takes one person at a time. So that's a whole nother conversation.
Let me just comment on something because I think it's important, and I think this
do you
goes
care
on.
if I drink? Sorry.
Girl, you grown and got a kid.
I'm very grown, right?
You know what I'm saying?
And being an old mom is not what's up. I love my baby, but being an old mom.
You ain't no old mom. Check this out.
I'm an old mom.
So check this out. Here's what's very interesting and let's go back to the original principle, hyper consumerism, that is a barrier that's created, right? That is a created barrier that is very intentional. It was intentionally done, and it creates a frustration. It creates a barrier to success. And then we talk about even the support of Black businesses. There are barriers that are just embedded in the process to be able to do that. You have to go out of your way a lot of times to be able to do that because, as you said, some of these venues require that they have systems set up where you support their family members and friends to give
That's
their
right.
friends the money. So now you have to try to find something that's going to be suitable, that has a more relaxed, contract, so that
You
you
know what?
can do these kinds of things. And it's
You
really
just
hard to
have to
do.
push, you just have to push back. We knew the kind of money that we were spending, and we said, this is what we want to do as a family. This is the decision that we've made as a family, and this is what it is. It is a movement for us, and it
But
requires anybody who's listening, right? Anybody in our family, you can do this too.
yeah,
You
but,
know,
but
but we got to move on to talk about like the other pieces, because the next piece is not only rejecting hyperconsumerism, the importance of staying in the black in terms of having more money at the end of the month than you spend, and spending money with businesses that are in alignment with your goals. So yes, it should be Black businesses. Yes, it should be women owned, but it's people who are politically aligned with you, that have your interests in mind, instead of just spending anywhere, transferring your wealth. That doesn't make any sense. And the next thing is adjusting the mindset. And I feel like you and I and our families, we've done this, we've talked about this, but talking about moving from that consumerism mindset to a mindset where we're constantly thinking about saving and investing. And on my one of my favorite quotes is by Warren Buffett. Well, in this context, right? It's not my favorite quote in life, but in the money context, it says there's someone sitting in the shade today because someone else planted a tree long ago.
right.
You know, and I love that quote because it really brings it home. And it's like, where do we want to be? How do we adjust our mindset? Because, a lot of the questions that, you know, you've asked me over the years, or, your daughter has asked me, or we talk about, is people listen when we're having conversations out in public, and they'll say, how do I get started? How do I get started with investing? And it's like, you know what? How do you get started? You open up an account, you open up a brokerage account. And everybody knows, where I work professionally, but it's not about where I work. You open up a brokerage account, first of all, at a legitimate financial institution, right?
Right.
So name your large financial institution where you can open up a brokerage account. And most of those places, you can start an account with $500 or whatever. And then think about where you want to spend. Sure, I feel like I deserve to drive a Tesla, right? I may not want to spend $90,000 on the car, and make no mistake about it, I'm not telling anybody to buy Tesla right now. It's the stock is pretty high, but I'm saying, for myself, when I look at myself, I could think, you know what? I don't want to spend $90,000 on the car, but maybe I'll buy some of the shares of stock. I love Apple products. Is it okay to have that in my portfolio? I will go to Target with like a gala dress on right now because there's nowhere else to go. So I just go and put on like my gala dress and like walk through Target, with Tetra with my husband. So if you ain't that crazy, I have not posted a picture of me doing that. I've totally done that, right? Because I couldn't wear my gala outfit this year. So I wore it walking down the aisles at Target. And it was like, you know what? I'm not making any recommendations, to you or anybody in our family.
Don't
But what
worry,
I'm
I won't be walking down no aisles with no gala dress on. Don't you be
I
good.
walked down because I wanted to wear it. But what I'm saying is like, when you have an investor mindset, you just open up your refrigerator and you see where you're spending your money, and you say, you know what? Let me look and see what this company is. Can I buy shares of the stock? Can I have some ownership? And I'll never forget, I was at the Black Economic Summit in Atlanta. And I was in the car, and I was doing a symposium, and I was talking, and Alfred Edmonds Jr., he is one of the editors of Black Enterprise. He was moderating the summit. And I remember this young kid who, they were talking about buying Burger King or buying McDonald's. And this young kid decided that this young kid wanted McDonald's because he knew he owned shares of the company. He knew he was the owner because the parent had said, no, we own McDonald's. Let's go ahead and shop at McDonald's. Let's eat at McDonald's. So he didn't even want Burger King. But what was amazing to me is it was a 5-year-old that knew that they owned McDonald's. So let's go to McDonald's. And what I'm saying is, regardless the company, legitimate financial institution, let's just go ahead and get started. You know what I mean? Let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and get started because it doesn't cost that much. And that's a big barrier in African American communities because we don't have a lot of people who are licensed, and shame on, the industry that I work in. We don't have a lot of people who are successful in the business and have been there longer than 10 years or wherever. So you have all of these people in the community that don't know where to buy their stocks, and they're reaching out to try to grab people. And what I have to say is, look for the legitimate financial institution, because I don't want family members to get screwed over. You know that I only work with clients who have over $500,000, right? Cash liquid. But what is hurts me to my core, to my heart, is I want to be a resource to everybody else as well.
Right.
And so how do you become a resource? Is just saying, listen, deal with a legitimate financial institution that has been around for over 50 years, right? Nothing brand new that's popped up last week. Open up an account and make a systematic investment into that account, and just make it automatic. That's number one,
Can I,
having that investor mindset.
well, I think what's very interesting too, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. If we just even not just look at how I'm spending my money, but also look at how other people in the community who aren't willing to make that leap to stop spending a particular way and start investing in stuff that the people in the community spending on, until they get to the point where they want to start changing or whatever. We can look at trends of where people are spending, and that sometimes is a good way to determine how we want to invest. You know what I
You know
mean?
what? You can just look at where you spend your own money and start taking ownership where that is, right? Like, Tetra loves a Ford. Okay. He loves a Ford all day long. He will keep getting a Ford over and over and over again. Never mind when I married my husband, when I first started going out with him, he was driving this raggedy truck with rust all over it, has all this real estate, all this business sense, but I liked it in him because I knew that he wasn't spending his money on like fancy things, so it was one of the things that drew me to him, was that rusty was that rusty white truck, because he was so frugal and financially astute. So developing the investment mindset and making a systematic contribution um, to investments, at a legitimate institution, right? And then so the next thing, which the thing that you and I have always spoke about, is we've spoken about kind of retirement resiliency and really getting real with retirement. And it's so important because in the Black community, we have a lot of people who take Social Security at 62. No shade to that. If you need to do that, you do what you got to do, right? In our family, we always say there's what's right and there's what's real. What's real for you is what is real for you in a particular moment. But you have to understand that you're taking a permanent reduction in your lifetime payments for making that decision. Can you push it off 3 years? If you can't, that's fine. Life is short. I get it. But that's something that we need to understand. And when we talk about retirement resilience, we kind of gloss over, checking with our current employer to see if there is a company match, right? Is there a company match? Can we at least do the bare minimum, which is the match? That's the bare minimum, because that's an amazing return on your investment. But then after that, what's the money move? Right. And and I'm not telling you because you and I think differently, but for me, the money move for me was, let's get to the point where I can max that out. Let's get to the point where I can max that out, because for me, it was like, okay, I want to reduce my taxes, and I want to put away for retirement as much as I can. And so when I was able to cut my spending and get to the point where I can max it out, that's a beautiful thing. So now you've got the retirement flowing. Retirement used to be a part of a three-legged stool. So you had your pension, you had your Social Security, you had the money that you can put away for yourself. And what we're having a problem with in the Black community, which I feel like you forget because you have a pension, right? You have the pension, you have the Social Security, and you have money that you put away for yourself personally, but everybody doesn't have that pension. And so we have a community that is facing insolvency. It's that is in a depression, facing insolvency. And so what happens is, in this area where we have baby boomers retiring and transferring an amazing amount of wealth, while we're talking about the Black and wealth gap, what we are forgetting is what is happening on the other side is we don't have a lot of wealth transfer going down. And so it takes someone to say, you know what, I want my daughter to be able to sit under the shade or have that as a possibility. It's okay for me to plant the tree today. And I don't even feel like I'm making a sacrifice, and the crazy thing is like when you build your emergency fund, and we see in financial books, if you're single, you have to have an emergency fund, 3 months savings, 3 months put on the side. I'm sorry, if you're married, 3 months. If you're single, 6 months. So we see all this in the financial books. But the reality is if you have an emergency fund, guess what? An emergency shows up. Just today, I had to go over to Sherburne. The pipes were frozen. It's 20 below here. I haven't had anybody in the house for a particular period of time. And so, you know what? I got to replace the furnace. That's an emergency, right? That's not something I planned to spend. That's an expensive emergency. And we are constantly telling people that they need to go into home ownership. And that's a real part of home ownership too, is all the expenses, that come with owning a home. And so there's different ways to do this thing, but I think we have to get real and get vulnerable about kind of our financial issues. And I think the reason that, like I said, you and I have been able to have successful meetings is because we keep it 100 and there's no pretext, right? There's no pretending. It's really us talking about our goals. You know what my goals are, and we're able to hold each other accountable. And I feel like that's what we need to promote, with the next generation.
Well, so I think, and just to reiterate, just so we don't want to be too long because people are going to start tuning out. But what I think is the first thing you said is the whole idea of rejecting hyper consumerism. I think that is the step number one. Free up as much money as I can now.
That's right.
And the way that I do that is to reject the idea that I have to have all the brand name stuff, $200 shoes, and a company that wouldn't hire me right now anyway, right? Unless you had Foot Locker or something like that. But this particular company that I love so much that I'm parading around the community that would never even have anything to do with me, that's using me, I can stop with those things and begin to spend my money more. And then once I do that, reallocate the way that I'm spending what's necessary, rejecting hyper consumerism, spending what's necessary in areas that I'm invested.
That's right.
And if I'm not invested in those areas, find a large investment company. And that's something that we could talk to some of the family members about, like what are some ways, where are some places, whatever, get in touch with you. Let me just say this too, which is interesting. I remember trying to come to you and you say how you want to help, and it's really difficult to help people that don't have a lot of money in the sector that you're in, dealing with the people that you're dealing with. You really have to have, a person really needs to have some funds in order to be able to get with somebody who deals with wealth at the level that you do. And that's the case with a lot of people. If you don't have a nice little chunk, your money's not going to make a whole lot of money anyway. So
but you know what? Hold on though. You know what? And that's the part that breaks my heart all the time, because yes, I work at this company and I work with high net worth individuals all the time. But I
gave you $10,000 and you was like,
no,
man, you was like, man,
I can't do that.
You said, take this back. I said, don't talk to me like that.
Listen, don't say that. But listen, do not have our business out here, because you're probably streaming somewhere and you better not be.
I peeled you off and you was like, man, get
anyways, but what I have to say is, listen, if we say, you know what, if we cut our spending, free up some cash, and we say, you know what, I'm going to make an automatic investment in XYZ big bank, big firm with SIPC insurance, and legitimate financial institution that's been around for 50 years, wherever it is, and I'm making a contribution on a regular basis. And listen, I don't want you to feel like that contribution on a regular basis has to be big. It could be $25 a
That's
month.
fine. Start
It could be
somewhere.
$50. Right. I just
Start
want you to
somewhere.
start. I just want you to start. I would just want you to get it going. And then while you're doing that, because you've freed up cash flow to create this, now you're not going to the club right now. Everything's in quarantine. We did a club quarantine in the house. Like, we were dancing, and I was like, hey, the silhouette was popping. My silhouette, I turned off too much information, but I was like, hey, this is what's up. We were having a ball, like club quarantine in the house. But there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to spend money like that. So it's like, you know what? Let's go ahead and make an automatic investment into whatever you do. If you want to do a basket of stocks, if you want to do mutual funds, however you work it. But then outside of that, you've got to be focused on retirement, because we are getting older. We are living longer, and we can't keep continuing as if this is something we don't have to focus on. And I understand, that there's a lot of varying opinions about retirement, but at the end of the day, if you have a match, that's 100% return on your investment for the most part, right? If you have a match at the company that you're at, you at least have to get in the game with that. And then the next goal is to say on a regular basis I'm going to do an automatic escalation until I get to the point where I max it out. If that's a goal for you, that was a goal for me. And I made sure I got to the point where I could max it out. And then outside of that, I think that we have to continue to figure out how we navigate the storm and continue to have conversations like this. There's what's right and there's what's real. How do you navigate the storm? It's to start building an emergency savings and make a contribution to an account, even if it's $25 a month, on a systematic basis. So if you have a payroll, you can put $25 a month, you can put $50 a month, you can put $100 a month, whatever your cash flow allows, to be able to start putting money away to build that emergency savings account, because emergencies will come. And right now, folks are getting stimulus money. Right now there's extra cash that's out there. And so we just have to make smart decisions with our tax refund and all of these things, and to start to decide, where do I want my values to align with where I'm putting my money? Do your values align with where you're putting your money? You can determine what someone's values are based on where they're spending. And so we need to be in alignment, with that. And I think when we talk about navigating financial storms and reaching through financial pain, because there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of pain in our family. That's why I didn't want to drink, this wine in front of everybody. And I'm sorry about that. But we have a lot of alcoholism and things like that in our family. And I don't want to promote drinking wine, even though it's really good. And I got my chocolate covered strawberries here, and this is really good too.
It
But
doesn't sound like you're rejecting it. I don't know. It
I am
sounds like you're
rejecting
going
it. I am rejecting it. But I'm saying, like, we have to have like a personal board of directors and people that we can have real conversations with, because that just doesn't happen, especially like in this quarantine, especially with everything that's going on. We have drama, we have emotional pain. I get mad, I get salty with family members, and I just back off the table. And like at some point, we have to embrace family, because the one thing about family is nobody cares about your bio. Nobody cares about what I've ever accomplished and done. To me, at the end of the day, you're my you're my mixed cousin, right? Right? And I'm your loudmouth cousin. And that's just what it is. You know what I mean? And it's not all of these different things. I forget that you're just this decorated firefighter that's done all these awesome things. But what the cool thing is that's the beauty and the awesome thing that comes with being family, right? We're family. So it's not about titles. You would be rocking with me if I didn't have a job, if times were tough. And it's not about you giving me money. You've never given me anything in terms of sending me a check, but what you've deposited in me has helped my marriage. You know what I mean? It's helped me to be able to get to the point where I even got to that space, right? Because you're a fake pastor. So, so all that helps. All that helps. I love you. All that helps. But what I'm saying is like
Welcome to the family.
we have to be willing to have these conversations. We have to be willing to have these discussions with
Hey,
no judgment, extending grace to one another.
so check this out. Rejecting hyperconsumerism
Yes.
starts there.
Good.
Got to start with rejecting hyperconsumerism.
Mhm.
Second thing, find an investment, some type of a major investment company.
You missed one. You missed one. Rejecting hyperconsumerism to create savings.
To create savings, so you can create some or cash flow, so you can
Right.
create extra. And savings is something that you're not planning on spending. Savings is not something you do for 30 days. It's something that you can put away, whether it's $10 or $25 a month. It doesn't matter. Start somewhere. Find somewhere that can help you tuck those things away. And then once you find somewhere, and there's two things here. One is to look at how I'm spending my money, and others in the community are spending my money, and then be intentional, if I can, to invest in those things that I'm already spending my money in, and other people are as well. And I want to say something. You made two suggestions about books, Think and Grow Rich.
A Black Choice, Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice,
yeah,
and Stop Acting Rich by Dr. Thomas Stanley.
Oh, wait, hold on. I put the wrong, I'm going to delete this comment, and I'm going to put that book in there, but Stop Acting Rich and Start Living Like a Real Millionaire. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just real quick before
let me say this before I forget. I want to put that in the chat. Okay. One of the things, and you said this a second ago about aligning my values. And one of the things that I think is tough, right? I found this in our own financial advisor. He's a super cool guy, right? But when I wanted to change my philosophy, he invests like straight down the road. This guy invests like he does investment one way. And one of the problems I wanted advised, just based on my own experience, when I wanted to change lanes and do something different, he wasn't with that. And so when you start thinking about somebody that's going to help me to determine how I'm going to invest my money, I need to develop a particular philosophy. So we can't just like the comment about the books. We actually have to pick the books up and start to develop a particular philosophy and be able to defend why we want to do that, and find someone who will help us to align our money with our philosophies. Because a lot of people, especially in the white community, they don't have to think about where they're going to spend the money. It don't matter, because no matter what, it all circulates, right? They don't ever make a decision to support Black, not always, but for the most part.
I don't think that's true, but go ahead.
But I'm saying that we have to be intentional. Black businesses don't thrive like other businesses, and so we have to be intentional in doing that. But when I'm trying to find somebody to help me to decide how I'm going to invest my money, I have to make sure that I understand the philosophy and where I'm trying to go, or they'll talk me into a regular philosophy like everybody else has, and I won't necessarily be able to do the things that I want to do. It seems like that's what you're saying. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm kind of saying that, but I'm also saying make sure that you're working with a legitimate financial institution. And one of the things that I want all of our family members to do before you start thinking about like what financial advisor you're going to work with, a lot of these financial institutions will allow you to do it yourself. You know, the best way for you to learn about money is to have an account that you trade on your own. When you have a small amount, you don't need to necessarily give that to a financial advisor. You can figure out how to work that on your own, and you'll learn a lot in the process. But what I think you should do, if you're looking at a financial advisor, you can go to www.finra, I think it's finrabrokercheck.org. Let me just take a look at what that is. And you can put in the name of the person. You'll figure out how much experience they have, where they're licensed, if they have a disclosure. And so I want us to do that. It's brokercheck.finra.org. So it's brokercheck.finra.org.
I'm going to put it in the chat.
Yeah, so they know that you can look up the person's information. But here's the thing. If you barely have any money at the end of the month, you don't need a financial advisor. You need to cut your expenses, right? And then go ahead and start developing savings. And once you do that, we can start taking some of these principles that are in these books and applying them to our life, right? Income doesn't equal wealth. So a lot of times we think, oh, I just need to make more money. But if we haven't focused on our spending, right, we are developing the sharecropper mentality, right? Where we
Oh, man.
just where we just accumulate debt. And I mean, we could talk about that all day, but there is a sharecropper mindset, and that was an intentional design, right? And so we need to make a money movement where we push back on that. So we know that income doesn't equal wealth, and we have to move towards that. One, work in the budget. You and I talk about having a budget, right? You can work that budget. Number three, know where your money goes. Like, if you don't have a budget, you should at least know where your money's going at the end of the month, where it's going, where it's landing, right? And if you don't know where your money is going, or you know where your money's going and you're looking at it and you're still in the red because you don't have enough money to make ends meet, still work on your expenses, but know where you want your money to go. So do a hypothetical budget, saying, if I had this, this is what life would look like for me. Because I promise you, if you make more money and you don't take care of your spending, you're just going to get to a point where you're always playing like you're just like a little gerbil on the little wheel. You know what I'm saying? So know where you want your money to go and make a hypothetical, because we've all been in tough situations. So when you're in the midst of a storm, or when you're driving, you can't drive like looking in the rear view mirror trying to figure it out. So you can't get caught up with where you are, right? You just got to focus forward. But then also understanding time is money, right? Let's spend time handling our financial future. One of the lessons in one of those books is love the home that you're with, right? Super important, because a millionaire next door principle shows that wealthy families have been next door for quite a while. That's in the Millionaire Next Door book. Half of people who've accumulated $1 million or more have lived in the same house for 20 years. So in that book, Stop Acting Rich, I like Thomas Stanley digging deeper to address like different questions about wealth and consumption and about living in, the house. But when you look at people who've accumulated $1 million or more, over a third live in homes that were valued at 300,000 or less. So there's people who've accumulated a lot of money, and there's a people who've accumulated a lot of things. And in the book, they call them millionaires and aspirationals. I don't want to be an aspirational who just keeps on spending. There are 67,000 or millionaires or more who live in mobile homes. Now, we don't have to take it that deep. But the crazy thing, Jason, I don't know if you remember me telling you this, when I was a financial advisor at Morgan Stanley, it was actually Smith Barney at the time. I'll never forget my first millionaire client. I don't know if I told you this. And now that's all I work with is people who have a 500,000, or more. But I was really young in the business at the time. This was like 20 years ago. And I remember I got this account and I was looking for the guy's house and I couldn't figure out where his place was. And I was exiting and I was like, I don't know where I'm at. I must be in the wrong place, because I was in a mobile home area. And he was trying to tell me where it was, and he was explaining to me where his house was, and I was explaining to him where I was, and he was outside his mobile home, and I was in my car driving around, and he saw this black girl and I saw this guy outside a mobile home, and we both thought that we were the wrong person.
Wow.
Right? So it was just it was crazy, because I later meet this guy, and he was a janitor who just put money aside in his 401k, lived well below his means, had $1 million that he accumulated in his 401k, and I was his financial advisor. And when he saw me, he wasn't expecting someone black. He was calling me Nikki. And when I saw him, I wasn't expecting someone who lived in a mobile home. So we were both shocked. But what I'm saying is we have to be willing, to be able to spend kind of within our means and adjust, our wants and desires, right? Or just put them in check. Why do we want this particular thing? And then the thing that you've told me It's to love the spouse that you're with. And that's lesson 7 in these books. And it's talking about the majority of people who are wealthy are married and have stayed married to the same person. And it's been very, very difficult for me to move from this I'm an independent woman mindset to, oh my gosh, I'm married and I have to check in with someone. Like that has been a very, very tough transition, more of a transition for me than being a mother. And so in these principles, it talks about marrying someone with the same kind of frugal mindset or the same kind of mindset, because you can't accumulate wealth if one member of the household is a hyper consumer. And then you and I have always talked about kind of the car that we drive and not driving away wealth, understanding that it's a depreciating asset. But at the end of the day, I think that we have to tell our family, one, that we have to check in with each other. We have to talk to each other. We have to be willing to be vulnerable. We have to be willing to pull up with no pretext. Like, forget the bio, scratch all of that. Let's just have a conversation, because at the end of the day, I want you to leave a legacy behind for my nieces, my nephews. I want us all to move the needle. I want us all to move the comma to the left, be it fast or slow. I don't expect that anybody wants any handouts, and that we all want to do what we can with what we have, right? So if it's starting a side business, if it's starting a side hustle, let's have a conversation about how we do that successfully, how we do that correctly, and how we can support each other's businesses, how I can patron your business, how I can support what it is that you've got going on, and have meetings like this on a regular basis, so that we can get the job done. Because at the end of the day, I love you. I love your kids and I want the best for them, because your kids will be here talking to my daughter long after I'm long and gone. And we have to keep that going, you
Well,
know?
I like that. I think that's a good way to kind of end the segment in this particular meeting. And I just wanted to recap again. So one is to reject hyper consumerism, to free up cash. Once the cash is freed up, find someone or find a vehicle through a reputable institution
Reputable.
to be able to invest that freed up money, even if it's 10 or 25 bucks a month, it don't matter. Just begin to start doing stuff like that. And then also as a form of investing, even if I don't have $25 a month, a way that I can invest, if I'm at a particular company or whatever, or if not, find out where I'm spending my money and begin to invest in those things. Make it a priority to invest where I'm already spending my money. And then the last thing that sound like you, and these are just some other value things too, right? There's something about consistency in family, right? Having a spouse long term, meeting someone that has the similar goals, and most of the time, and that's a whole nother conversation. But I've been saying this for years, that instead of getting premarital counseling, you should get, and that's one of the things that I said with you and Tetra, like told him keep that ring, don't give her that ring yet. Let's have a conversation first, man.
You sure did.
You need to have pre-engagement counseling, because once you give her that ring, both of y'all just gonna make all kind of excuses about why you two are perfect, and you gonna promise to change one another, and change it's not gonna work. And
you're wrong for that. You were wrong for that, by the way.
It worked. But then here's something I think is good too. Is I think, and lastly, and we can talk about this another time, but one of the things I've had to come to terms with is that the mistakes I've made over my life, and I'm 50 now, I'm about to be 51. The mistakes I made, I can't go back, right? I can't go back to 30 and 20 and make different decisions. It's only by the grace of God that I have came into the career when I did, and had the time that I did, and the money we bought our house in the time that we did. I mean, it's only by the grace of God. I can't say nothing about making those decisions, and then having someone like you, a family member that I can call and ask questions. You've helped me avoid some major pitfalls. But one of the things that I've done, and I think that this is extremely important, some of us may be too old to go back and fix something, but what we can do is what you said. I am beginning to plant a tree as much as I can. I don't do it very well because no one sat down and talked to me. So I kind of had to just get it how I get it. So I kind of treat my kids like that. I tried to make it a little bit more intentional with the girls and with my nephew, to be able to teach them some of the things that I'm learning and get them to start thinking and helping them start investment accounts and stuff to begin to plant that tree for them. And we can talk about what some of those tree planting things are, maybe in another family discussion, talking about life insurance and stuff like that, because I think that kind of stuff is important. And I think that there's other ways that we can plant seeds in areas that we're already doing it. We already have some really good resources that we're probably already using for work or whatever that we can turn if we really understood the value that they have, and we could begin to invest more into it, like 401k if you got a match and some of these other things. You free up capital for a reason, not just to put it into a bank. You free up capital to put it into an investment, to be able to invest it. So I appreciate it, but this has been good. I think this conversation is so vast. There's so much to talk about. I feel like as we begin, and you and I always have family discussions about this, but I wanted to open it up to other family members to be able to start thinking about some of the things that we've been thinking about over.
Did you do that?
What's that?
Did you open it up to other family members or whatever?
I did.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Hi, everybody. Foot tape, Patton. Everybody. I got to call everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. I love you guys. I know we've had a lot of family tragedy recently, but I mean, at the end of the day, we pull up and we try to be there for each other, and that's how this goes.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for doing it. It's good.
Of course.
Always appreciate your advice, and reach out. Anybody have any questions or whatever, man, for sure. Reach out and we'll try to structure maybe some of these conversations around some of the questions that we might have from some family members to be able to talk around some of the issues that individuals may have. It's better that this is, I think, a little bit better to do it this way than they have a whole bunch of people and there's a whole bunch of questions and answers that make it a lot longer. But I love you, and
love you too. All right.